When I was much younger, I would, if I could walk by and somebody was loading the truck for something, they're just about done, I'd look over and think, they're doing great. They only got 10 minutes left. That was me then. Now I would say, I could probably help them with that last 10 minutes to get it done. You know, the teammate next to me is always more important than me. Both of those would have been fine. Some of them, but both were noticeable. One person would notice and say, they always walk by the last 10 minutes because they're okay. But teamwork wasn't about them being okay. It was about you being a team.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Welcome to the very first episode of the show. I am very excited for our first guest. He is the SEAL that's in my memoir. Without him, my podcast, my children's book, my upcoming memoir would never exist. He is the founder of Team Eagle 1, the Navy SEAL prep program that I was in. He was in SEAL Team 2, 3. He runs a nonprofit called Direct Action. He has his own company that helps businesses grow and scale. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Coach Mac. Thank you so much for being my very first guest on my podcast.
It is absolutely my pleasure, Gina. I was very excited to hear you're doing this. And with an introduction like that, I'm going to try to do my best and speak like I'm somebody else there and see if I can pull off, see if I can add value to that. So if I can support that. So go ahead. Thank you. It's nice
being here adds a lot of value. I'm so excited to get into your mindset on what training was like for you and the lessons that you brought onto Team Eagle 1, because the lessons that you taught were, as a civilian, I'm speaking from that standpoint, has changed my life in the civilian world. And I remember joining the team and you said so many things and it didn't click right away. And I always said to myself, like, does this translate to like real life, like civilian, everyday life, which is very different than military life.
I remember the discussion is how does this translate? And I thought, just like, it'll not only translate, it'll redefine.
Yeah. And it does. It really, it's changed and shaped me. And the person I was is not the same person that even finished day one of training. So I want to back up a little bit. And I want to talk about you and why you became a SEAL. What started all of this?
Wow, that was a lot of years ago. It was like before most of the trees you see out there were around. So let's see why. I do a lot of youth programs and work as you do as well. I've been really loving watching your the tour you've done with the young kids and place to place. So really amazing. But I found there's something I explain to folks when I talk to them in high school, especially, is a lot of times people talk about all these opportunities, but you can't see them from where you're standing. Like, you understand that they're out there in the world, but you just can't see them from where you're standing. And I think that makes a lot of sense to a lot of young folks, because everybody talks about, oh, you could do anything, you could be anything, you could blah, blah, blah. But that's actually a whole bunch. It's millions of little tiny steps. So I joined the Navy, actually, when I was 18 years old, because I knew there was more to do, more that I wanted to do. There was more satisfaction, more helping people, more ego boost, whatever your motivation is. It's all good. People have often said, well, people shouldn't join for the wrong reason. Are you kidding? I thought it would be the coolest job in the world. I had no idea what it was like. It actually, the coolest jobs in the world have a tremendous amount of boredom and 7-day week works and 20-hour days and all those things. So, but I joined the Navy because from where I was standing, I just couldn't see opportunity. I couldn't see what people talked about or what you saw on TV or all these things. And I knew that I felt like I just needed to change where I was standing. And when I was a little kid, I used to go to these country fairs, and they always had these little mobile homes that they'd pull on in there. And they were the military recruiting mobile homes. And the only one I ever went to was the Navy. And it wasn't even that I thought about the Navy for years. In high school, it was a very kind of a challenging time, as it is for a lot of people. In some ways, wonderful in others. I I went down to the recruiter's office and I thought, so that's the only military I checked into. And of course, but I should back that up and say I was super weak as a kid physically. I was a great runner, pretty strong runner, cross country and whatnot. But I was so kind of weak. In fact, I could watch my heartbeat in my chest because when you have enough muscle, when you don't have enough muscle mass, you actually watch your heartbeat right there. So I was so skinny that one day a friend of mine walked up and he grabbed my arm and I was wearing a long sleeve thing and he goes, "Oh my gosh, dude, you need to eat a cheeseburger." And I'll never forget him saying that. But he was it was just being funny. But so I couldn't have gone into the SEAL team when I went in the Navy. Not a chance. If you had held a gun to my head, I would not have passed the PST. And when I say that, it's not one of those, "Oh yeah, I'm sure." It's, "Oh yes, I'm sure." I couldn't have passed any single part of that PST except the run because I was pretty strong in it. So I went down to the recruiter's office and I thought, let me just see what's out there. It will definitely get me off of where I'm standing. And has a little bit of structure for those folks who think the Navy's like a big structure thing. It's really not. It's 10 or 20% structure. For most people, it's more than enough. And he said they offered all these jobs. They sounded horrible, every one of them. And I said, "Wow, those sound horrible. I don't know anything about the military, but that sounds bad." And there's kind of a general rule that if the job sounds bad in the military, it's about 10 times worse, minimum. So if it sounds bad, it's bad. So, and finally he said, "You test really well. You're like, up there." He said, "So I have this one other job, but you'd have to leave next week," which means in those days, it wasn't go to MEPS in one day or one weekend like it is now. It was run like a crazy person to 12 different places and sew everything up. And he said, that was in the mid 80s. And he said, "You have to leave next week." And he said, "But it's got a top secret clearance." He goes, I don't know much about it. And I said, "Oh, that's me right there. If you don't know much about it, it's definitely going to change where I'm standing. And top secret clearance, anyone who's silly enough to give me a top secret clearance, that's the job I need to jump into right now." So I did. I went into the intelligence field as a cryptologic technician. Yay for all you CTs out there. And back in the days when there was Morse code and whatnot. And next thing you know, I spent time at NSA and other areas for incredible for a then 19-year-old. I was definitely standing in another place. So I very much got what I asked for and more. And along that line, along that trajectory, I just started to say, I'm tired of being weak physically. I'm tired of being physically weak. I don't mean, mentally or emotionally. That's just not something I would have said about myself, but was physically very weak and had a bodybuilding friend in Puerto Rico when I was stationed there. And he said, "I bet you've never worked out for 30 days. And I said, "Oh, I've started working out." He goes, "No, but not for 30 days. He goes, "You have to get past 30 days. And now fast forward into this days where you hear people talk about the 31-day process, the 30-day process, the 28, 29. It's just neuroscience and chemistry there. So he was right. I'd always stop 2-3 weeks into something. So he said, "Go 30 days and you'll never look back." And I never did. So his name was Tito. Thank you, Tito. He actually dated a friend of mine there on base. So I got to know him and he was fantastic. And he said, most people just won't go past 30 days. And now that I'm such a neuroscience geek and teaching the neuroscience of things, I realized that you're going to take a step forward. You're going to raise the plateau. You're going to raise your baseline in that 3 to 4.5 week mark. And so you're going to become a new level of baseline. It's one of the reasons I think I would phrase it as that our brain resists going to those areas. So I trained like crazy. I was in a program that sent me to San Diego from Puerto Rico. And one day I was sitting there and I saw these guys who were arrogant, kind of cocky. And I said, "Who are those?" Insert profanity here. And someone said, "Those are bud students." And I said, "What's a bud student?" And then the rest was history. So then I was in a job field at the time. Cryptologic technicians could not go into the SEAL team. You actually had a list of countries you couldn't go to in those days as a crypto tech. Well, those were the countries you would go to in the SEAL teams. So it took a lot to do it. I had to kiss a lot of booty, but it worked out. I was pretty squared away as a young sailor. Of course, I don't know what happened to me after that. Fell apart. But next thing you know, I got the bug, and that's how I ended up in training. It was this going from the weakest person I knew, and truly one of the physically weakest people I knew, to now 30 well, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I graduated 36 or 37 years ago, a couple of weeks ago. So that was it. We just had that. So, and the rest was history. It was really just a trajectory of doing one thing every day toward that objective of getting stronger, getting faster. And then you talk about mindset. Mindset is all in the repetition. So it's not a magic. It's not listening to TikToks and everything, although those are wonderful. I do a lot of them. So do you, thankfully. Don't give up your TikToks. But mindset is about repetition. So I had to just make it to the gym every day. I had to make it to work on time. I had to do these things. You can't do that and not get better at other things. You show up for your friends, show up for yourself, show up for your job, show up for your health, and you cannot avoid raising the baseline. So it's, and here we are. It has definitely changed my life. Some things, for better, for worse, depends on who you ask. I'm not going to share. So that's it. But go ahead, please.
So when you then went into Buds, right? What you said you prepared physically to get there. Did you know what it was going to be like? Did you know it was going to be physically, mentally, and emotionally challenging, or was it a bit of a shock?
That's a fantastic question, because if you're a young person now going to the program, you have seen literally it's a multi-billion-dollar by the time you're done industry of movies, books, all these things. The Navy has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising it over the years. None of that was around. There was just those little VHS videos. For those of you who don't know what VHS is, just Google it. So that there's these VHS videos in those country fair things where they would show these little Navy SEAL kind of videos. But it wasn't just that. It was really the Navy I was headed towards. The SEAL team kind of came up about it. So no idea. Charlie Sheen hadn't even made the movie Navy SEALs yet, to give you an idea of how much wasn't there. I have probably seen every movie about, I used to love war movies, Westerns, all that kind of stuff, classic. Typical. I'm making myself a stereotype, but none of that was available. I thought Buds was like boot camp. I thought it was 7 days a week. I thought it was they go until they're tired. I always say I'm going to keep doing this till I get tired, and of course I'm just standing there as the coach. But it wasn't. So yes, I trained like crazy. I was religious about it. In fact, to the point where it may have been a distraction to other areas of my life, but that's necessary. It's like when you go to the program, you're about to change the next 50 years of your life, one way or the other. If you fail or you quit or whatever, people carry that around like a weight. No one else cares. Your family forgets about it. Everybody forgets about it. But the person who rings out or quits or whatever, didn't make it, I found they tend to carry that like this emotional weight. So I had no idea about anything at training, nor did I think I should have an idea. There's the real brilliance of back then. I didn't think I should know. I just went. And people said, well, why did you not quit? And I said, well, the Navy gave me orders. They didn't give me an ask. They said, you were ordered to attend 26 weeks of blah, blah, blah. And then that meant actually the last day I would graduate and walk away. They didn't ask me if I was interested. And at any time, if I wasn't, I would just ring out. But I also trained like crazy. Like I thought it was 7 days a week. As I said, I actually thought the instructors would beat you up like physically. I thought I got to be prepared to like again, insert profanity here, whipping. And it wasn't that way. It's a structured program. They have more than ever now. They know where they're headed, why they're headed. The instructors there aren't making it up. They're delivering a program. So it has come up and down over the years, but I had no idea. It was from day one. It was probably one of the best experiences I've had in my life. I wish it had gone on for 2 years because Buds is much longer now because they have SQT there as well. That used to be at the active duty SEAL teams. So now you stay at the command for a number of months longer than you did before. I would have personally loved that. I thought that was one of the best. You know why? There's no decisions to make. Just get up every day. You just follow along. It's wonderful. You're doing, imagine it's like all of a sudden becoming a professional athlete without the contract and the money and the wild parties. But it's all of a sudden just doing that kind of thing. And every single day, I did not have to know what was coming. For those of you who are older, who have had enough life to appreciate this, that listening, imagine every day you're doing something you really enjoy. You didn't have to plan for it. You didn't have to decide. You just had to put yourself together and show up and jump as high or higher as anyone wanted you to. Well, that could be a challenge if it lasted forever. It was one of the most enjoyable times of my life. And I'm not saying it wasn't stressful. I'm not saying it wasn't hard. I'm saying it was just black and white. Life was very black and white. You're full immersion, and nobody's dying, and you're doing amazing work for yourself. I'm not saying it's amazing for anyone else.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company. DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex, and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content, from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed, giving you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, you get 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. So walk me through, what was a typical day? You thought it was 7 days a week. So how many days a week was it? How long was it? Walk me through a typical day for you.
Sure. Well, you're usually up at, here's something very few people know, but is that I actually drove home every night. Now they have a curfew there, but I drove 90 miles home every single night in Buds. I think there's probably 2 nights I slept in the barracks. So I was dead tired every time. For the entire program, I was on a 2.5, 3 hour sleep night. Turns out that's a pattern they kind of set in motion for a long time. So I drove home. The amount of times I was driving back to the command at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. To make it there for 5. My roommate says I was the best roommate he ever had because I never slept there. So the room was always clean. And inspections, I just showed up, stood inspections. Now they wisely have incorporated a curfew, probably for people like me, because I just thought, I'll just go home. It's only an hour and a half, 2 hours. So,
wow.
So I did it every single day. Also, probably stole a lot from the team bonding and whatnot. So a typical day is you're starting at 5 or 6, depending on when you're getting together with the instructors, but you're out there at 5 a.m. for sure, getting yourself together. The thing I always tell candidates in training in the Team Eagle 1 program, just see on the wall here that you know quite well, is look, they're going to go to lunch, they're going to go to breakfast, and they're going to go to dinner every day. It's not going to change no matter what. So that's one of those things I realized, it's not only whenever they get tired, they're going to go to lunch and they're going to go to dinner. And it turns out that they really value their time off. They're not boot camp. Turns out these instructors really value their time off. So they're not going to voluntarily stay here and just torture us for more than an hour or so. Now there's actually less of that than ever. Again, just the nature of the evolution of things is gratuitous additions to training have minimized over time. So you're going to do at least 6 miles a day of running, because going to eat and back, going to chow and back is 1 mile each way. So there's 2 times each. Now, I happen to enjoy running, which makes Buds a much more livable, tolerable experience when you're not tortured by running. I have some great friends, great SEAL team friends who were tortured by running. They'd rather get a finger cut off than actually go for a run. So for them, it was a minimum of 6 miles a day. And then there's always more. There's running around. So one of the biggest events, or one of the biggest concepts in a day of buds, is that you're always on the verge of being in full motion, at full tilt. You're always on the verge of transition all the time. So I appreciate this more and more as I go through life, that because right now, as I sit here I'm in Texas right now doing some work, and I'm not always on the verge of getting up and running a transition or doing whatever. So there's always something. There is no other training program I've seen in the military. I've trained 1,000 candidates for different military programs, spec ops, at least 1,000, maybe 1,500, 2,000 by now. But there's no other program. There is no animal like buds, which is why I say, if you're training like your soccer coach trained you, fantastic for soccer. It's not going to get you through here. If you're training like your CrossFit person trains you, fantastic. It's not going to get you through buds. Though there is no animal like it, and every sport is designed to train for that sport. So it's a combination of things. In a way, I think that's why Team Eagle One has been so successful, is I didn't create a training program based on anything but what it takes to be there, and then the mechanics of injury and all those things, which is why we end up with a 0% injury, right? Because we teach something that sports don't. We teach something that high-level college sports don't. So, but the average day, to get to your question, the average day was just, you're just going to keep going. You never had to know much about anything. In my memory, I didn't have to plan for much of anything. You had a specific set of gear. You had a specific set of variables. You're going to run. You're going to swim. You're going to get tortured. You're going to be yelled and screamed at. You're going to sit in a class that was not you were just going to do a certain set of things. And even though it was a wide range of things, that's all there was. But since you were full immersion, except for the fact that I drove home at night to Newport Beach, which is where I lived at the time. So when I went in, so probably the dumbest thing I ever did was drive home from buds every night. So, but the days are very structured, and they're also full of variables. In fact, you bring up a great question, Gina, is when people ask me, what's it like? I feel like I actually train people for everything so that they don't have to know what it's like. There's this odd thing that if I thought I knew what it was like, I'm always 100% incorrect, because I'm not there. And it's not today. It's not right now. So even if I knew exactly what it was like, it would be different next month. Mm-hmm. I'd say, oh, more of this, more of that. So in a way, the idea that I need to know what's coming is actually kind of can be one of the concepts that help you quit, because then everything is different. It's always a surprise. If I don't know what's coming, it's not a surprise. It's just what happens. If I think I know what's coming, everything is different and everything is a surprise. So, but I trained like a crazy person physically because, again, the one thing I knew is a very physically demanding, and it was, if we talk about this another time, we talk about the training theories and how Eagle One ended up at its 96% success rate in graduation for buds, was because I simply trained for everything, in any direction, run, swim, ride, go in, all the time. And then, so I didn't have to know what was coming up. It's like well-rounded people, great education, great physical health. You're more likely to be okay at anything. And then you can just decide what to get better at. So I realized I took way off track from your what was every day like, but the days were long. In fact, I went there. A candidate just called me the other day. Fantastic young man. He's in buds right now. And he said, I can't even get to the gym. I'm just too wiped out. And I said, yep. And I said, now you know why I have you be 40 and 50% stronger than your peers, right? He said, yeah, because I'm still stronger than almost everyone here. I said, sadly, they just don't know better, because if they did, they said, it's not that they're not capable. It's that the information out there is so poor, and the Navy is so hurting for people, that the general mindset is, Gina, you're ready to go. No, you're not. Do simple math. If you just understand math, then you realize, no, you're not. The Navy standards don't create graduates. Even auto-qual, it actually creates more people who don't graduate than it does. So, so whoever the folks listening to your podcast, especially, you have to look at a graduation rate. you have to look at an injury rate in a program. You have to know that this person is not saying, well, just do what I did. You could do what I did because it worked, but I'm much smarter and more knowledgeable than that now. So there's a lot of things I wouldn't have you do and things I would have you do better. But the days are long. They're super tiring. You're always on, and you're always appropriately, if you're typically appropriately anxious. Some people are terrified, but you're appropriately anxious. In other words, the unknown is coming. You just get good at moving into the unknown. So,
how many days was it? Was it 5 days a week, 6 days a week? You said it wasn't 7.
Yeah, it was in that time period. It was 5 days a week. And so what happens? A lot of things happen on the 6th day if they need to. So over the years, I was in a class over 200 classes ago now. So that's how old I am. I know, right? I always feel like I'm like 29 or maybe 35 on the outside, but no. Then I get up in the morning. I'm like, oh no, I'm not at all with that. I'm twice that. So you could be on the 6th day, but you actually need the break. You need it psychologically. You need it physiologically. In a general mindset, you watch people quit at a few different times in buds. They'll quit in buds prep, which is typically I always say the folks who just needed to get away from all the people they were telling they were going into the SEAL teams. And when they got away from them, they were like, okay, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get up this hour. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to be wet, because it's a lot. They've been oftentimes they've been telling people for years that were going into the SEAL teams. It's just, I'll do whatever it takes. And they train hard. And there's something that happens in buds, and it's that nobody cares where you come from. Nobody cares whether you're the captain of the football team. Nobody cares whether you're the best baseball player, best wrestler. Nobody cares. Instantly, overnight, everything that your ego may or may not have depended on, nobody cares. If I look at an old buds photo right now of all of us, we all look alike. I have to really dig in a photo to even find myself, because we all look the same. We don't think we do, but we look the same. But nobody cares where you come from, which is one of the reasons that the people who had it, the people who are always the captain of this and the top of that, there's a tendency for more of them, per 100, let's say, for more of them to wash out, simply because life was about being good at things. And nobody's good in buds or in the SEAL team. They're good compared to other people, but that's not the job. The job is to get better. The job isn't to be better than other people. The job is to get better all the time. The lowest performer in a SEAL team performs pretty freaking well, and up there. So you spend your weeks, I always say people tend to quit in buds prep because they just realize, all right, I have no other influences. There's light, and this has started to get real. I'm out of here. So they'll lose an actual large percentage of people before training. Very interesting too, because they are physically capable of everything in buds prep if you pass the test. Then the first day people quit because it just got extra real. All of a sudden people yelling and screaming, and nobody cares where you came from. We are equal opportunity targets, so nobody cares. Nobody cares if you're black, white, Mexican, whether you got an accent, nobody cares. they are just going to, everybody has got the same level of beating coming. And then day three is when all of your ego, day 3 is when you're nothing. You're just there. So you find this a lot, the 72 hour, I talk about it in class, right? The 72 hours. So you get to day 3 and nobody cares. All of a sudden, all your ego just goes away. You're nothing. You're just here. And on day 3, you're going to become a candidate or you're not. It's in that 72-hour arc. You'll notice this with a lot of people by the 3rd time they do something, 3rd day in a row. And then the end of week 1, people are psychologically exhausted. But then we go into week 2. Week 2 gets your next batch of people leaving because now we are physically exhausted and we are psychologically exhausted. It is the double whammy, and people move forward and say, wow, I don't have enough strength and I don't have enough mental strength, which was all about your training program. It is not about the person. It's not in your DNA. If you made it for the first week, you are now capable of doing everything at least once, but you may not be strong enough to make it the next day. So by week 2 and 3, your strength is dropping down no matter what. You are not going to get stronger in buds. You might get better at some things, but you're not going to get stronger. It's that way. So there's really there's incredible science to it. I'm so glad, like you of all people, understand more, because we've not been in the training program. And I've talked for so many hours about all these things, civilian world, everything. So the basic days are just really long. and that is physically wiping you out. All of your input from the rest of the world starts to minimize itself. You are becoming this person, or you're not. So it's a brain and body can only take the next logical step. So a certain level of training, conditioning, and awareness and discipline has to happen before you go in, or the next logical step is to go back to the life where that didn't happen in, and not move forward to this life. And sometimes that's better for folks. Sometimes the best thing could happen to you is to realize this life is not for you. Nobody rides this train for free. There's a physical, emotional cost, mental cost. You're not going to own a plant. You're not going to have a pet. You're not going to do things for a long time. That your life is truly your own, but not your own. So I never understood when people said, "Oh, sacrifice," when I was younger, because I just loved it. But now I do. People used to say, "Oh, do you have a pet?" And I said, "Pet, I can't own a plant." I said, "I don't have enough time. I couldn't keep a plant alive with this, with a training schedule. Forget about deployment schedules and heavy time. That's unreal. Training schedule alone." So anyway, I ramble. Go ahead.
One thing that changed the whole trajectory of my life was something you said the very first day of training, because for me, it was just supposed to be one day. I just asked you if I could just experience your training one day. I was doing a kidnapping thing. I needed to see if I could make it. And you were like, "Come on down." But you said something that changed the whole course of my life. And you said, if you think day one is hard, try day two, because your mind is going to give you every logical excuse on why you shouldn't show up. And in life, you're always taught day one is the hardest day. And
showing up as an artist.
Yeah. And you debunked that. And it was so true. It's like day two was even harder because I knew it was coming. Every logical excuse came up. And I had to fight that. So for yourself, did you have to fight yourself at all? Like when you had that day off, like that 7th day off and possibly that 6th, 7th day off, what were the logical excuses that were going through your mind to get you to not go back? Were there any?
In my case, and this isn't but when people talk about this subject, I should add this in, is that it's not a boastful thing. Some people, their life kind of streamlines in BUDS or in a program like that. It's like college. Some people go to college and they'll kind of get it together. Where in high school, they were just just kind of falling apart, or that peer group association, or sometimes they're in college falling apart and doing all their craziness, and they get to their first job and it's like, boom, they straighten out and they're right on point. So I did not consider quitting. For me, BUDS was kind of a dream come true. First of all, like somebody was paying me to just show up and run around, and again, once I realized it was 5 days, I thought it was going to be 7 days a week. And I thought it was going to be like this psychological torture. So because I not only trained for it, but also prepared myself for this, not that I was prepared. I mentally convinced myself that, okay, get ready for the 7 day a week. But, no, going back was not as I said, the Navy gave me orders, not an ask. They didn't ask me to go to BUDS. They said they gave me orders. So I just took it as, first of all, my view of the military was, you don't go do something there on a whim. Meaning it was a big selection process. And let's face it, I had to kiss a lot of butt to get there. I was having people hand carry paperwork and, all this stuff, because literally my detailer once told me, look, Petty Officer MacLaren, he said, hell will freeze over before you will get orders to BUDS. Well, I always have to hear no a number of times because, again, if we just talk about neuroscience, everything, our brain is designed to just say no to things we don't want to deal with in our day. It's one more person we have to take care of or whatever. And I just thought, okay, well, that's fine, but it's just admin. I'll at least just keep trying it. So no, I never thought about quitting. It was the first time I had ever been able to do a training program of that magnitude. So it was, it's a high 6 or 7 figure program per candidate. So that's incredible. So in that respect, my objective was so clear to be in the program and go through it. I had no idea what the SEAL team is like. People often say they want to become a Navy SEAL. Well, that I have a photo of me graduating. That's what becoming a Navy SEAL was. That photo. It is a 1 second in time. It was actually the training program. It was actually the steps. It was actually the things that were involved and I wanted to do, because becoming a Navy SEAL is a single second in time. So it's actually becoming the person and traveling the path and accomplishing the things. There's so many things that I wish I was better at, more mature about at that point. So please do not hear me that I was even good at anything. Because it was 6 or 7 years before I actually said, oh my gosh, I could be so much better at everything. And that kind of changed the trajectory of my life. Maybe so much better as a teammate, friend, everything, all these things. But graduation, becoming a Navy SEAL is a single photo. That's all it is. It is the path and the trajectory, which is why the path and the trajectory, as you prepare for it, is what's so important, because that's what allows that photo to be taken. And that photo came and went, and you're like, oh, well, now what? See, if all I wanted to do is become a Navy SEAL, then there would be no point in continuing. We've actually done that. So I didn't have to work hard to come back. I really, but I've listened to some other folks. Wonderful. It is, by the way, if someone thinks about quitting or has to, there is no problem. You might have something you just hate to do. You might hate the cold water and be like, God, I just have to force myself to get back in it. This just happened to be a program. If I had to go to calculus every day, I would have said, oh my gosh, it's all I can do to go back on Monday. Freaking calculus class is killing me. Right. But I didn't. It was buds where they're just going to run me around and torture me. And also you're working with, remember, folks in buds, instructors in buds, they don't, for the most part, they don't dislike you. It's not, you're going to see some of them again. I've worked with several of my instructors over the years. Some of them, live 15, 20 miles from me. One of them, my class proctor, actually. So you're gonna see those people again, but no, it's showing up has nothing to do with how hard it is. Meaning, you've already been through a day of it. You go through another day. Obviously, you should. Showing up has very little to do with how hard the task is, but your brain is designed to resist hard things unless you have a repetition of showing up for those things, no matter what. So showing up becomes about showing up, not about what comes after it. So if you're training yourself, but there's many times in life, I've had a little time period where I stopped being on time so much and doing things that I thought, wow, this is horrible. I'm accomplishing so little. My clarity's off, things like that. And, but yeah, showing up is not necessarily about the hard thing. So train yourself to show up no matter what, and then do whatever. Meaning showing up was not about leg day. Showing up was about walking in the gym. Showing up was about getting to work. And I don't know if you've had it, but I've had time periods where all of a sudden it didn't matter so much to me, but I watched the quality of life and my level of satisfaction deteriorate. And I thought, that's chemistry. That's the chemistry we talk about right there. Yeah.
Was anything really hard for you? Or was there anything that you disliked? Like you mentioned cold water, you mentioned swims, you said you were really good at the runs, but was there something that you weren't so great at, or something that you really disliked?
Let me think here. I'm sure there was. A memory has a tendency to, well, at least mine does, not necessarily focus on what I didn't like. You focus on things that were either funny or really miserable, but it's not that you didn't like. I will never forget when you're at the time they used to call them sea foxes with the boats you drive back in. There's something I remember like it was yesterday. So if there's any SEAL team folks listening or whatever, then they'll probably this might resonate. Is just sitting there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when you're come out of the water or do something and you're in a boat and all you are surrounded by fumes. So for the next hour and a half, you're just bouncing around dead tired because you got up at 05 and you're still up working at 03, getting out of the water and the next day. And so I would say if there's something I don't miss, it's sitting in that sea fox, just smelling those fumes, sitting there thinking, okay, just focus on nothing, focus on nothing, focus on nothing. But it's at the same point, it's everything has a degree of difficulty. So, in fact, you asked me earlier, why did you go to BUDS? And actually people said, why did you want to become a SEAL? What I didn't know about the SEAL team. I wanted to go to BUDS. I wanted to go to the place where I'm a big fan of psychology, neuroscience, all these things, as you know. And I wanted to see what people thought was hard, and not so much to see. Part of it was to see how I would do in what people thought was hard. Because remember, I don't have any relationship to myself. I'm 18 or 19. I've got no relationship. We do contests. We might go for a run or do this or the other. But I wanted to see what other people thought was hard. Nobody finished a sport and said, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. So the world said, this is such a hard program. I thought, let's see what hard actually is, because then I have a standard to kind of assess by. In that area, it's also hard to go be a microscopist or get into high levels of math or science or any type of teaching or philosophy, all those things. So it's just that I wanted to see in that kind of physical world. Remember, I come from a place being very physically weak. And so it was very interesting to go, let's see what people think is hard. And so now I understand it. It actually was crystallized a lot of my work in the future was, okay, now I understand how people quit, when they quit, why, as far as how I might define it, their why would be different. So no, there was no one thing, because that program was simply where I really wanted to go. And I really wanted to go through butts. That was, SEAL team was this ambiguous thing, had no idea. I really wanted to go through buds and see what it was like. And it truly was, it did not disappoint. It is challenging all the time, but I'm not really sure how I would define hard, except for calculus. I would call that hard because I could study and study and study and go, I can't get my head around this calculus thing I was doing so well. When I was 7 in school with little blocks and counting, what happened? What happened along the way? So that's it. I don't know. What do you think is hard?
I thought all of it was hard.
So that's what I mean. But hard, I guess it comes down to how would we define hard?
Oh, I mean, I'll start with the very first time I did a pull-up. I mean, when I was in school, I did them in gym. I was in elementary school. We had to do pull-ups, and I was able to do a pull-up.
That's right. And when all the ladies were out shining the boys, like, no problem. Like, I'm getting all swole. No problem. No big deal.
I got this. But I remember, I believe it was the second day of training when we did pull-up, and we were doing that assessment test, and we had to get to pull-up. And I was last to go, and I couldn't even reach the bar. Alec had to lift me up. That's how small I was. And you said, okay, now lift yourself up. And I thought my body was just going to go. I lifted up. I had no idea that it was going to be hard. I just thought it would do it. So when you were like, go ahead. And I'm doing my very best. Like my body did not want to move. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that was the biggest challenge, I'd say, for myself in terms of, okay, my goal then became, I want to do a pull-up. And then by the end of it, I ended up getting to 4, which was incredible and amazing. But I remember that was my first experience of my gosh, this is hard. It's not like the runs were hard for me. I'm not a runner at all. I don't like running, but it's not like you put one foot in front of the other, but it was the pull up. It was like the flutter kicks, the sit ups, the push ups, you follow your body, you just, you put your arm, like you said, when you do the sit ups, you put your hands on your shoulders, and your body's naturally going to get yourself up. And there was a lot of things that you said mechanical wise. I was like, yeah, you just do it. But the one thing I couldn't physically do was the pull up. And for me, that became hard. That was hard, you know?
What? And you really, what you're saying is really brilliant. So hard then almost sounds like it's something about familiarity. My basis in reality, I just thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, wow, that was a big light for me. So great. I'm glad I asked you. It's, I love the way people phrase things, as you know, is that, so maybe that's it. If someone says, well, you didn't think buds was hard. And I don't mean I wasn't wasted, tired, or brutal, or exhausted, or going, oh my gosh, I just can't, I got to get over this and this and this and do that. It's that it was as I expected or better. So perhaps that's why I don't relate to the word hard very much. Is the more you have, like you said, as you adjusted to your new sense of reality, then all of a sudden pull-ups weren't the hardest thing you did. It was getting the mechanics down. But when you expected it just to happen, and that was a big light for me because I work with so many, actually, since I'm a business and development coach and then a youth mentor, I work with people from 10 to 80, years old. And I see the same thing. It's about your level of reality. Is that whether we think things are hard or not. So when I went to Buds, of course, I expected it to be this way. And it was this way minus 10% or 15%. It was physically more challenging per minute, but it wasn't my first barbecue in physically challenging things. I had trained for it and done all this. So I would say my expectations were met, as opposed to, one of the things I say at Eagle One is my first job to minimize shock and awe in the training program. I'm not training you like Buds. I'm training you for anything like Buds. So, but I'm not training you like Buds. It is in no way my desire to simulate first phase, nor could I, because you couldn't put yourself in a position to pretend that you were in that position. It's not a rational line of thinking. So I train people to navigate and succeed in a program like that. So I don't care which military it is or whatever. Buds just happens to be the longest. So it's the most physically arduous because it's the longest training program out there. But you really hit a light bulb for me. Is it perhaps hard? Is because people thought they knew what was coming, and I trained for every event I could, and now I have really advanced that training for other people. Of course, I was just lucky. I stumbled upon enough to do well there. But so maybe hard then. The reason I don't have such a grasp of it is I have a pretty strong sense of reality where I think, okay, yeah, this is about what this should have been like in my head. So I don't have a lot of shock and awe. People tend to surprise me on occasion. They very seldom do. So when it happens, it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming, because usually I do, usually I see it coming. So, maybe that's it. You have a great description of hard is that I thought I was this and I'm not. And I would say, if there's a thing about humility, people often mistake like a lack of confidence for humility. It's that I didn't think there was anything I couldn't get better at. I don't think there's anything that I actually know. There's just a baseline of behavior that seems to work out. And when it doesn't, we keep progressing. Why? So I think humility is not a lack of thinking you're good at things. It's just understanding that there's always more. There's always more to go than you will have the lifetime to develop, right? So you will not live long enough to know much of anything, if anything. And you could always get better, except you're dying along the way. So perhaps that's what legacy is, right? You just pass on the best training environment we can and living environment. And then people take it from there and they go as I'm on my, I'm well past the halfway point in my life. So something to think about.
I think for me, like with Team Eagle One, like for me, it was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life, physically, mentally, emotionally. I mean,
it's biblical. I always tell people, Gina, you're so right. The Navy, when this used to be a contracted program, Team Eagle, when it started out as a Navy contract, they were running it as a diversity program, to create more diversity in the SEAL teams. Turns out that's very hard to target. I always find diversity is actually a consequence of a well-rounded program. It's not a targeted thing. It's like assessing the colors in your crayon box are not actually what tends to create diversity. It's actually creating a really amazingly open program that tends to attract more people. So I would say Eagle One is one of the most diverse training programs I've ever seen, but it's a consequence of the way it's run and the way we train and the way we train leadership and all these things. It is not, I said it's an intended benefit because it's like there. So people are like, so it's a diversity program. I'm like, so is anything that's run well. It all by the nature of the way it happens. And I know this is a challenging concept for people to understand, but if there are, the Navy called me once and said, look, we love what you're doing in this program, because it was a contracted program. So I talked to folks in Millington, which is where the, heads of the Navy are for the recruiting and all that. And they said, we're afraid candidates are going to quit because it's so hard. And I said, that is a lack of understanding of how people function. And if you give me 6 months, I will demonstrate that not only will they not quit. I said, I make training biblical. Like it is a banner day for everybody. There's not you, Gina. It's everybody. Everybody in there is getting ridden hard and put away wet, like over and over. What is it? It's something, it's 2.5 to 5 hours and no one knows when it's going to end. It's going to end 2.5 to 3.5 or 4 hours in there. And nobody knows, which is also tough. But I said, I said, your biggest problem is that you're lying to people. And they said, what? And I said, you're telling people they're ready to go when they're not. I said, candidates aren't stupid. They're just inexperienced. So they don't know what you're lying to them about, but on some level, they know you're lying, even if it's unconscious. I said, so for me, I train the living crap out of them and they all rise. So they get to know no matter how it goes for me, I'm in the right place, doing the right thing. And you were the same way. You can be dead last and keep showing up. And all of a sudden you're a little faster, you're a little faster, you're a little faster. And that is what discipline is. I showed up, I put out, I went for slightly better biomechanics, better friendship, a little less irritable, more pleasant, whatever it is. But the Navy had said, they said they were really afraid people are going to drop out and quit. And I said, you're just not seeing what I see in people. I said, so give it 6 months. Well, in 6 months, I was not only the only person who had people going to BUDS in the whole program. I was the only person who had an enlistment rate at all. In other words, my section of the program was the only place people were enlisting from. I have a higher enlistment rate than most recruiters. I have a higher enlistment rate every 6 months than most recruiters do all year, because there is no BS. We train to be the top 10%. And if you're not the top 10%, I will tell you and say, look, here's the trajectory you're on. Let's make a 2 or 3 month plan, see if you want to change it. Most people, it is very common that people don't know where they're headed. They have a fantasy in their mind of what they'd like. If you train properly and you keep showing up and you train hard like you did, like everyone at Eagle One does, then pretty soon what you get is, as I like to say, you don't work this hard and not know who you are. It's that simple. So when I watch people who don't know who they are, I think, well, very simply, you're not working hard enough at the thing that was necessary. Maybe it's physical. Maybe it's a training program. Maybe it's something else educational. I used to run a program up in UC Berkeley right before the pandemic that was all about getting people from people who were getting people into Ivy League educational tracks anyway, in this case, Stanford, Harvard track. And the reason being is there's a certain type of training that just makes you better in those areas. So whether it's academic, as that was, or I do the same thing in corporations where, remember, if you can do it in corporations and you're familiar with the educational system and you're familiar enough with BUDS, that kind of thing, the same logic applies across the board. I just changed the program based on the vernacular of these things, where it has to go for these folks. So if you're doing your corporate program, expect the same level of rise. It's tremendous. You don't have a year, so it's going to be there. But if you're doing an academic program, same thing. There's a way of being that is beyond academics. There's a way of being that is beyond basic understanding of your profession. And there's a way of being that actually allows you to go through BUDS. And you're talking about that now, that your way of being began to shift. And with that, your reality shifts. So it's really it's a blast. So you see why I never get tired of work. There's what's the first rule of Eagle One in direct action? Everyone wins. Everybody wins. You don't come to a single day and don't come out better for it. Everyone wins. And so when we talk about, it's a diversity program, whatever. Well, when everyone wins, you will start attracting everyone from everywhere. It will not be relevant. And then people will not mind. Those things just aren't relevant. You start attracting everyone from everywhere because you raised the standards, didn't lower them. You raised the standards. People want to do better, but their brain resists it when in any type of isolation, internal, external, real or imagined, whatever. So that's a rabbit hole. Sorry. Go down the neuroscience, go down the psychology rabbit hole of things, but that's what we're talking about, right? It takes courage to show up every day. It takes great courage to show up every day. People talk about, it's so courageous in the military. Yeah, maybe. It takes great courage to show up every day. Parents, I always think it takes more courage to be a parent and show up every day and not just want to pound people. It takes more courage to show up every day for your kids and your family than it ever does to be in the military. Ever. That is a black and white. If you notice in that movie, what is it, 13 Hours? What was it? In that movie, he said, I've never been afraid when fighting or in combat or anything, or in a super hostile environment. I think, of course not, because your brain, if that's how you've trained your brain, or life has trained your brain, you're super functional at. Your IQ drops down. You get tunnel vision, tunnel thinking. Not worried about what kind of math, what kind of grades your son or daughter has. You're not worried about the dog who's got the cancer treatments coming up and you're wondering if you should do it or not. You're not worried about any of that stuff. You're just doing this. It's very, very simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Everyday life, you're showing up over and over and over. It takes great courage to show up every day. That's why we talk about being on time and showing up. It takes such courage to say, no matter who I think I am or what I feel like, I'm going to go to work. And I'm going to go to work on time. And if I didn't go to work on time today, I'm going to adjust and go to work on time tomorrow. It takes great courage to do that. And that is where working the quit out of yourself comes from. I want you to quit because you should, not because you have to, because it's just not the place for you, not because you have to, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, that makes so much sense. And you had a lot of lessons at Team Eagle One. You had lead from the front. You had my teammate is more important than me, which that took me a while to understand. And you had so many amazing lessons that translate to everyday life that I believe that every single person listening to this will take into their own life to be better and elevate themselves. And I wanted to know, when did it click for you? The big one for me was my teammate's more important than me, because I realized when I focused on my teammate, like you mentioned, you're not so cold, you're not focusing on all this other stuff. You're not hurting as much. You're not
physiologically, it changes the actual physiology. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you're looking at somebody and oh my God, sucks for everybody, and then you learn to embrace the suck, because it's you're realizing everyone is in the pain that you're in. And it just takes everything off of you. And I wanted to know, of all the things that you, have taught and the lessons that you shared with others, when did you start learning this? When did you learn about teammates? And when did you learn about leading from the front and all this other stuff? Was it in Buds? Was it throughout your time in the SEAL team? Was it just something you grew up with in childhood and learned?
Well, I wish it was. I wish it was all those earlier in life things. I wish I didn't. I wish there weren't. It took me, I think I mentioned early on, I think I was about 5 or 6 years, maybe 4 or 5 years into the SEAL teams before I started to understand that there was so much more that I didn't understand. Perhaps it's common, perhaps it's not, but I kind of grew up in that world where if you're good at things, I was pretty good at that job. I was good at shooting. I was good at things like that. Obviously, I was a good runner, so that meant you're just less tired than a lot of other people. I worked out like crazy, so it meant I was pretty strong. And I think I may have quantified a lot of life that way, where, okay, I'm good in the field or doing something like that. I'm good in the competition or in the game, if you will. But I wasn't so strong. I would still resist, avoid admin things. So it's about 4 or 5 years before I thought, wow, that's actually what a teammate is. It wasn't, I guess I would summarize it like this. You're expected to be good in the field. If you go to work every day and you're good at your job, so what? You're expected to be good at your job. That's what it was. That was the job. The job was to be good at your job. So being good at your job and getting better at your job shouldn't come, great if people compliment you or whatever. And I do all the time. If I love seeing what people are great at. I would say everybody has superpowers and humans are brilliant. If we can create an environment to let their brilliance kind of come out, it's brilliant. There's no such thing as a safe space. someone says a word you don't like, and all of a sudden it's unsafe. So there's no such thing as a safe space, but there's a wonderful place that you can navigate, and we can create an environment or a culture, if you will, at work or at Eagle One or whatever, where people aren't so prone to a fear-based response, no matter what you say, So, no, it was not, that was not the automatic path. No, I was not the person who actually grew up with that superstructured family and we had those little nice lessons and learnings and things. That just wasn't going to be my way after a certain age. Everybody has their own trajectory, and I wouldn't change mine for a bit, because we wouldn't be sitting here now. If I changed a second of any day, it would very likely have changed everything. And I love thinking about things, and I think it's I love thinking about things. I love listening to people. I really think people are absolutely brilliant when they're able to kind of let it go. But if we think about it, took me 4, 5, 6 years before I realized I might have been assessing teamwork based on how we were when we were fully engaged in something, training, whatever, it doesn't matter what. And yet when it came back to teamwork, it was, I'll give you an example. When I was much younger, if I could walk by and somebody was loading the truck for something and they're just about done, I'd look over and think, they're doing great. You only got 10 minutes left. That was me then. Now I would say, I could probably help them with that last 10 minutes and get it done. The teammate next to me is always more important than me. Both of those would have been fine. Some of them, but both were noticeable. One person would notice and say, you always walk by the last 10 minutes because they're okay. But teamwork wasn't about them being okay. It was about you being a team. And so when you think about the teammate next to me is always more important than me. It's a big SEAL team saying, I didn't make it up. Lead from the front is something I just kind of coined some time ago. And then find something you like about everyone. Those are things I came up with in my whole kind of understanding of how we navigate life better. And then I really got into the neuroscience and teaching it or whatever, and understood the chemistry of what I was saying. Those sayings really have impact. But no, becoming a better teammate was a long-term process for me. And it wasn't that I was horrible, maybe. I don't know. You might have to ask people. It's that I didn't understand the depth of those phrases. The teammate next to me is always more important than me. When I meet somebody in today's world, my thought as listening to them is, what can I offer? So I'm I would say I'm a breakthrough business breakthrough coach. And I would say business breakthrough ninja, because if you think properly, then I don't think, what should I tell them to do? You're listening because I really want to hear and understand them. And then what you can offer will come up. So if I go in the door thinking what I can offer you, then I've already supposed who you are, which then doesn't make me the greatest teammate in the world, does it? So, but if I go in the door knowing I've navigated a whole bunch of life, let's just listen and see what I could possibly offer. Sometimes offering is just listening or just showing up. In fact, that is the first point. That's all empathy is. Empathy is actually asking myself how you feel about what you're saying. So if I wanted to do just basic empathy in a conversation, I would ask myself, how does Gina feel about what she's saying? Oh, she sounds really enthusiastic. And I might say, well, you sound pumped up. And you'd say, I am. But I'm also maybe a little anxious. And I think, there we go. See, now we're in the same place. When people say, put yourself in someone else's shoes, impossible. I will never be you. So I can come as close as I can. Maybe it's right on. I don't know. There's no way to assess that, but maybe it's right on. So all of those things, it took me about 5, 6, 7 years before I started to be on that path. I remember when I got out of the Navy, I really cared about people, what happened to them, teams, whatever, places I'd work at. You almost always rise to that management position in a place just because you show up and you follow through. And turns out that's not so common in the world. So as a young person, I remember when I was leaving a company once to transfer, and someone said, you're the best manager we've ever had. But that was 3 or 4 years. That's 3 years after getting out. That means I sucked before then. And I did. I was the same person who cared the same way, but my way of being, my way of listening or understanding or The empathizing, meaning I understood what you meant. It didn't mean I was in your position. When a single mom comes in and says, oh, I'm late every day because the babysitter, put yourself in her shoes. How's that possible for me? It's almost insulting to say, I know exactly how you feel. I freaking don't. And I never will. I'm thinking, wow, that sounds like it's really challenging. And it would be for me. I can tell already. And so half of it is the fact that you're only 12 minutes late every day. Good on you. I might be 30, 40 minutes. So in a way, it's the best empathizing I can get. For me to say, I know how you feel. It's like an insult. When my brother was alive, he's a quadriplegic and he was an amputee, and then he lost his leg, lost his likeness, amputee. And then another accident several years later became a quadriplegic. Go figure, right? And he said to me once, I said, Jim, I look at you sometimes. I have no idea how you feel. I had nothing, no idea about your life. We started crying. And he said, you're one of the first people that said you don't know how I feel. He said, I'm so goddamn sick of hearing people tell me they know how I feel, because they don't. And I thought, wow, good. He said, you're one of the first people who said, Jim, I have no idea what it's like to be you. He said, finally, someone recognizes I cannot pretend I'm you. That's it for everything. I could have had someone die in my family, like I have. So you have a feeling for how devastating it is, but I don't know what it's like for you. But I can at least have my own experience to tread lightly or do whatever. So I listen to people say empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. You can't. You just can't. Just think you can. I know how you feel is actually, it's almost a disconnect in and of itself. I can't know what it's like to be you, but I sure can listen and reflect and go, he's so pumped up about that, or wow, that'd be stressful for me. And I'll also notice whether, so I became a much better teammate about 6, 7, 8. When I went back in the reserves, I got out for a couple of years, went back in the reserves, and all of a sudden I was adding more value than I ever had before. And I thought, wow, finally, I'm not just thinking it's along this way as you watch the values. So you can really assess your teamwork by how often you do things that you didn't need to do. Wasn't necessarily in your job description. You're just adding value. So the teammate next to me is always more important than me. You said it. You actually become warmer. Physiologically, you will change your focus in the same way walking on the hot coals, all those things that you have. If you're internally focused on how much you are going through, your entire physiological, neurological system runs more poorly. Your IQ drops down, your available IQ, your ability to think positively, to critically think, problem solve, have empathy, be creative. It all drops down. So a negative work environment literally makes you dumber. Because, and I'm not very smart. So I have to be as positive as I can. I need what is it? There's one research study. It's kind of fun. It says up to 30 IQ points drops down when you're negative and when you're stressed. Up to 30 IQ points. That would put me at what? Negative 12, negative 13. You'd still have a bunch, but you'd be above 100. I'd be like negative 12. So I'm an enlisted guy.
I don't know. I had to go to summer school every year, so I might be on
your level
there.
You bring up something about school you actually have to learn how to learn, and every subject is different. So when someone comes in and says, "Oh, I'm okay over here, okay over there," we have to learn how to learn. And living in Los Angeles for a bunch of years, I watched the whole attack of the Ritalin and all this stuff come up, where everyone got diagnosed with something. And I just thought, being a person who, when I went back so I started going to a junior college when I got out of the Navy, and I realized, I don't have to suck at some of these subjects. I just had to learn how to learn, and I learned differently in each thing. For me, I was very auditory, so I'd go listen to those young folks. I was about 10 or 11 years older than everybody else. I'd go listen to people study. All of a sudden, I had A's, or if I was working a lot, because I always had a 50, 60, 70-hour week. So, then I'd live with a B plus or something, whatever there. But all of a sudden, I wasn't struggling to get C's. I just had to learn how I learned. And unfortunately, the system, it's very challenging for that to be accommodated in schools, is to learn how you learn. I learned about some subjects. I would study and read and read and read. Always be like, oh my gosh, it's like a C minus. I'd go listen to people study, A, every time. Because of course, the more you go through school, the more your test is about what you read, not about what you heard. And I realized, I just need to create the environment that and I think it's one of the reasons I've done so well in a lot of the other areas that I teach now is that those are conversational, and you're listening, hours and hours and hours. And then you're thinking, and experiencing. So collectively, the other thing about those young kids, they always knew the questions. What they were studying was right up. I could study the whole book front to back and still hear the question and think, that wasn't in that book. They knew the questions. They would study. I would think, how'd they know? It's like 80% of exactly what they said was on here. So you have to learn how to learn. And if you don't, there's nothing but anxiety coming. And anxiety is just a matter of your brain can't figure out where to step or what to navigate. So it's the opposite of confidence, right? Our brain is designed to get a little anxious millions of times a day, and how we navigate that. But we have less and less navigating. We might not navigate life so much. We might not go so far from home. We might not have more challenging things at school. We might just have to show up and not be a problem. And it's one of the big changes in school is if you're not a problem, people are thrilled. Oh, thank you. Gina's not a problem. Used to be, if you're good at something, someone said, hey, Gina, you're really great at this. Perhaps you'd like to get into this program about history because you're so great at history, and we'll do that. Now teachers are overwhelmed, and it's more as though than I've ever seen them before. And this is measurably different. You and I talked about this the other day. It's not just the physical world. Candidates are measurably different when they go to buds, much, much lower on the scale. They will tell you, and some people will tell you, they're stronger in some areas. But overall, the failure rate is much, much higher because now they can't get people to join the military. Militaries are extremely understaffed, big challenge. But the sciences, all of the high level, again, I have a friend who's a microscopist, as he tells me, because it's so hard to even get the same number of people to this field. They're just not making it at the lower levels. So it's not physical that people are coming down. It's everywhere. And yet, as you and I have seen over and over again, so I work with it professionally, academically, and physically for the Navy. It's not that your potential's down. You get in the right program, and 6 months later, you're an animal. You're an apex predator in the making, whereas it is trained. It is trained. If you want to be really, really great at something, unrelated to anyone else, meaning just better and better, you train yourself for it. I may not ever be a pro football player or basketball player. Fortunately, I don't want to be the one. But so you might be unrealistic about your objectives. But if you just wanted to get better and better things, you always, always, always can. None of it, leadership, none of it is something you can't train yourself to be really very, very strong at. None of it. I've worked with thousands of people between business owners and teams and students at again, UC systems and the Ivy League systems all the way around, and then tons and tons of candidates. None of it you needed to be born with. None of it. Now, to be the fastest athlete in the world or the strongest in some way, there's a genetic component to that. But to be better and better and to be considered really valuable as a teammate, none of it had to be something you were born with. Otherwise, life would have worked you right off the Ancestry.com list. If you had to be born with everything to survive, you'd have been worked right out of the Ancestry.com. You wouldn't even be there anymore. I wouldn't be able to do that. My DNA test every time Ancestry sends me a different DNA algorithm. So I'm like, I have an identity crisis now because they keep changing where I'm from. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was here and I was there and I was part of this group and I was from that part of the world. Now I'm just shifted all over. Thankfully, Scotland and England are still there. If they take away my Scotland, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I'm having a total identity crisis. So
being that the podcast is called Mindset Lessons from the Field, is there one lesson that you can give to our viewers to help them improve their lives today, right now?
Let's see. Perhaps it is that as we just started talking about, you can get better at everything. It is just trained. perhaps it's that people are actually pretty brilliant. It took me a while to think this. It took me a while to understand this. Is that when you're thinking they aren't, it's actually your brilliance that's being held back. So, right, because it's all meaning my fight, flight, or freeze. For me to think everyone's stupid means my fight, flight, or freeze system is really activated, which means my IQ is down, my health is down. So, find something you like about everyone. This is something I stumbled onto when I got out of the Navy. I was really great at a lot of things. None of them were in the civilian world. Nothing I was really strong at, experientially strong at. Nothing was a requirement of the jobs I had. I did a lot of security work and some contract work overseas back and forth for a lot of companies and folks. But so that might have been, but my existence in the civilian world was totally unlike my military world. So I realized if I walked in an interview, I worked in the film industry for a while as a dolly grip and whatnot, or a stunt. If I walked in the film into an interview, I'd be really anxious. So I did this one thing. Like we talk about, do one thing, right? Is I would walk in and find something I like about everyone. Now, since it's been years since that's passed, and now I teach the neuroscience courses, even to the, in master's level in psychology, all the future psychologists, they really need to understand how you actually get to maneuver your brain chemistry. But find something you like about everyone, which means it's not a judgment, by the way, because I'm not saying I like your personality, because I don't know your personality. Yours I do. I don't know your personality for most people. You might go in and go, oh, cool hair. Oh, look at those ratty old tennis shoes. It must be his favorite pair of tennis shoes. Those babies. I'm not going to retire those things for anything. And you see how you smiled and I smiled? That's just shifting brain chemistry. Because you walked in a room, you're nervous, you're anxious, you were wondering, and all those things. It's not making it disappear, because your concerns are real. What it's doing is taking away from your ability to be brilliant somewhere. So I have found since then that people are brilliant. Like the way you phrased that before, when I said, wow, we're a light bulb. It's because everyone's brilliant. So it's common that folks can have a hierarchical thinking of, oh, I'm better than you at something, or I'm the instructor. So the reason I'm an instructor anywhere is so I can hear more people and learn differently than I do navigating my own life. I hope that they benefit from what I'm offering, but I can't know that. But in listening to them, I benefit. The Thursdays, Leadership Biomechanics, every single Thursday, I think, oh my gosh, I am so much the better for sitting there, hearing people and listening to them. So find something you like about everyone. It will change your life. Your brain will function better. You will listen better. Because if I'm thinking something about you that I think is great, I'm going to hear you better. I'm going to hear you more. If I'm thinking about how stressful the world is, or how much it sucks, or how much I should have been this, or should have been that, or could have been a contender, then, but find something you like about everyone. Do it when you first walk in a room. Every time I walk in a room, I look around, I think, oh, there they are. They've been here 3 times now. Right on. That's pretty cool. Oh, look, they're always in the corner. So looking a little grumpy. That's great. Consistency. Love that. And they go, see how we're laughing? We have a good time. We have a good time with it. It didn't change the fact that I have to navigate things with these folks. There's a situation I just left at work, very, and the thing I kind of leave you with that is when people say they're so toxic, maybe, but actually you're talking about you. Because if you need to leave a relationship, it's because you're toxic. It's because your IQ is down. It's because you can't navigate to the right board, to your prefrontal cortex. So I used to do a lot of, did my master's in counseling and whatnot. And people would say, oh, I gave away my power. And I think, no, you didn't. You simply started creating habits that were strengthening your fight, flight, or freeze system. Now, maybe it's necessary, right? If people are married in a horrible situation, whatever, they can't just get out. They can't just walk out. They can walk out and be homeless. So believe me, it is no part of me that's not saying those challenges are real. Those things are real. Your anxiety is real. Your fear is real. Mine's real. Everyone is real. But I can't navigate it from living in it. Meaning, if I can't focus on what's out here, if I can't say, all right, I do see something. I like looking out the window right now. There's green grass out there. Huh, great. This whole park's empty. Chilly day, green grass. Fantastic. No matter what sucks in my life, I can navigate it better because I notice those things. So find something you like about everyone. It might just be the shirt they have on. They might wear the same clothes. I wear these shirts every single day at work. So I might look at someone like myself and go, he shows up. He's like the guy at the gas station in the old days. He shows up with a uniform shirt on every single day. You might actually think it's weird, but go, that's just weirdness. His thing. People are brilliant if we focus, if we train our brain to be more activated in the prefrontal cortex. That's where our ability to problem solve, critical think, have empathy, have creativity, spontaneity. Your brain does not want to naturally be spontaneous. It wants to resist change. It might be, have anyone ever called you and said, hey, we're having a party this weekend, having a barbecue? And your brain automatically goes to, oh crap, just say no. It might be the best. You get really busy in your schedule. I know. I've known you for a while, and your brain says, "Oh my gosh, not a freaking no, one more thing to do." So in my head, I'm always like, "Well, I don't have to do it, so just say no." It might be the best part of my week, but a brain wants to resist transition. Mm-hmm. It wants to resist not change because everything's always changing. It wants to resist transitioning from this to this and this to this. That's why we don't show up. That's why we procrastinate. It wants to resist transition. Once finding something you like about everyone is going, oh, Gina, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you. I might even say, Gina, my knee-jerk response was, oh my God, not another thing. But that sounds really fun. Yeah. And I know because I lived in LA for a long time. I don't like driving in traffic. The traffic is always horrible. You have to lose 2 years of your life just to do the math on when you have to leave for something. As you know, it's the worst. But I would have to think forward and say, I really like doing that. So maybe torturing myself for 75 minutes. Now I'm around, I travel around in my RV doing work right now. So now I never stay in a place for more than 2 days that's got a lot of traffic because I get to take that away from my life. And I just couldn't. Consequently, I'm much more focused at work. So find something you like about everyone. It's going to change your life.
I absolutely love that. Was a great way to leave off our viewers, and I am just so grateful that I got to talk to you. Our very first episode, you kicked it off. You set the bar. This was an amazing episode. You gave you dropped so much knowledge, and I really hope that our viewers loved it as much as I loved listening and talking to you. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to all of our listeners. Please go like, share, comment, subscribe now. Become a Patreon member so you get full access to our bonus episodes and extra goodies that only our patrons get. And tune in next week for our next episode. And thank you so much for listening to our very first show. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Gina.